Hello, friends. We are back. Tim, Kirby, Russia. With us again is Andrei Afanasyev. We talked to him the previous time about the war in Ukraine, and he mostly broke down the history of it. And where our sort of history lesson leaves off, this is where we're going to get into Andrei's more personal experiences as someone who's done frontline journalism, who's been a journalist behind the scenes, behind the microphone on the radio as well. We share that radio history together. We also share Christian TV history together. So anyways, Andrei, we left off at about the beginning of when the Maidan happened. So were you involved in covering any of that? Did you actually go see that or know any journalists who did? How did that all look?
Yes, at this time I was working for RT. I was a so-called headquarter journalist, so I wasn't a correspondent. I wasn't on my feet
Mm-hmm.
there in Maidan, but I know a lot of correspondents and editors who worked for RT and covered Maidan from its very beginning. And their experience and what I saw as a journalist covering it is that definitely Maidan is a typical colored revolution with all the number of technologies
Mm-hmm.
appropriated and tried for decades, starting in, I guess, 1968,
Yeah.
with these famous Paris riots of leftist students. And then with all the collapse of the Soviet Union, Eastern Bloc, and so on. And of course, I saw the people, the faces, uh, what they were saying, how they were saying, and it definitely looked like, a group of possessed people or a group of people who were under influence of some kind of psychological warfare,
Hmm.
as well as probably they were drugged.
Yeah.
And of course they were, and we know that. There are a lot of facts that among the protesters in Maidan were widespread different types of drugs.
Yeah. And in
So,
fact, there's been a lot of accusations that one of the things that can make men go out and die on a modern battlefield is drugs. That's been rumored even way back since like the Iraq Afghanistan war periods. So just something to keep in mind. Don't do drugs ever. It's it'll
yes,
get you killed in a way you wouldn't expect.
yes, and Nazis did drugs in World War II, and look
That
what
too.
happened to them.
No,
She didn't.
no.
That's
I
why.
I was the one guy from my first grade class. Well, I should say of the boys who didn't take that route. So I'm the sole survivor. I feel like I've won the Cleveland-based reality show. But anyways, Andre, so sorry to get away from my life and my terrible
Yeah.
humor here to something more serious. So the Maidan was sort of happening. You believe it was a legit color revolution. Okay, so then right after the Maidan succeeds, well, then what happens?
Well, war breaks out. Actually, the Maidan was the cause to start the war, because Ukraine is a synthetic state that was formed in Soviet Union, and it was formed of different parts of ex-Russian Empire.
Yeah.
And it was formed from two big parts, like the so-called Eastern Ukraine and the so-called Western Ukraine, divided by the Dnieper River, right in the center of the ex-Ukraine country. And the Western Ukraine was always, throughout the history, under strong influence of the West,
Mm-hmm.
unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
And the the Western Ukraine is the part where this Ukrainianism, this political ideology of Ukrainian Nazism was formed.
Mm-hmm.
And this group of people wanted to take over the whole country. That's what happened in Maidan with the help of the Western special services and media throughout the colored revolution, the classical coup d'etat. And the eastern part, predominantly Russian, Orthodox, and that was always connected with us. And people there, just like myself, they didn't want to do that. They didn't want to live in a country controlled by pro-Western Nazis that would impose same-sex marriages, that would do all these reforms needed to join the EU. So they said, let's federalize the country. let's make our unitarian country federalized so that we have the opportunity not to follow the laws, the legislation that is against our worldview and against our religion, against our faith, against our tradition. If you Western Ukrainians want to become the real Europeans through gay rights, that's your right.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't want to do that.
No.
That's how the war started, because after this, the new Kievan powers sent troops to get control over the eastern lands.
Yeah. Well, because the
And
two republics rose up and broke
yes,
away.
that's how Donetsk and Lugansk people republics started existing, because people just grabbed the guns at home, grabbed the firearms, the hunting shotguns,
Yeah.
and started defending the country. And of course, Russia soon started supporting them, because we understood that Russia is next.
Well, here's something. Maybe you have some more insider information, or maybe we could just get your opinion on it, because, you know, this is one of those questions where you don't live in the mind of Vladimir Putin, so you can't really answer for sure. But when the two Lugansk and Donetsk ethnic republics broke away, right? One thing is that Putin said publicly and on television, he was kind of like, you know, we may have did the referendum in Crimea, but maybe you guys shouldn't rise up. How about you don't rise up? How about you don't do that? But they sort of did it anyways. So was this against his desires, or was that some sort of political thing to not get Russia sanctioned? Is to just say, oh yeah, don't rise up. Or whatever you do, don't rise up. We'll send the ammo tomorrow. Was it one of those?
Well, to be honest, I think that at this moment we didn't understand the whole level of danger Russia was in.
Yeah.
And of course, at this time, no one in Moscow was thinking of that part of ex-Ukraine and the whole Ukraine sooner or later will be part of us. Because, well, and not through war we're having now,
Yeah.
of course. In 2014, even in 2014, it didn't look like something, you know, that we will all of us will be involved in this or that way. But that's happening here now in 2023. I believe that at this time Russia didn't have enough economic potential
Mm-hmm.
to be total. Because look at what's happened after the first package of sanctions in 2014. We became independent in terms of goods, in terms of food.
Yeah.
We now supply ourselves, sell overseas, and no sanctions can harm us. You live in Russia, I live in Russia. We both know that our supermarkets are packed with food. It's all made in Russia, but it's of a good quality.
Yeah.
Back in 2014, we still were dependent on importing food.
Yeah. It's
We
amazing
were
how
dependent
fast that
on
changed.
this.
Yeah.
Yes. We needed 2 or 3 years to fulfill this objective. So at this time, I just believe that our leadership understood that the direct clash with the West we're having now would be fatal for Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2014. That's why I believe it took us so much time to make the new step.
Mm-hmm.
February. Or I don't know really what happened, but I believe that in these 8 years between 2014, when Maidan started and the first Donbass war started,
Mm-hmm.
and actually the Donbass conflict started, and 2022, I think a lot of things have changed in our country, in our leadership, in our army, so that we could survive and withstand this pressure we are under now. We're not fighting with Ukraine, as we said in our first part of discussion, but we're fighting the whole West,
Yeah.
the whole Western economic and military infrastructure, both ammo production and investigation. and Ukrainians are just supplying conscripts.
Yeah, just sort of the human physical bodies needed.
Yeah, cannon fodder. Yeah, that's what's
Well,
happening.
then, if to answer, then this sort of begs the question. Then, again, this might be something that you feel might be out of your range of expertise to answer. Besides, of course, the spiritual component, which maybe I don't know, the primary component. Why did the Soviet Union get utterly crushed in the Cold War, and yet a Russia that started the Cold War on its this new era of Russia that started this new era has now been able to essentially resist the West in its entirety?
Well, of course, identity and you know, I'd say dignity,
Oh.
because Soviet Union, especially after Khrushchev,
Mm-hmm.
was a deeply colonial state. We already were a colony of the West, not in terms of economy, but in terms of thinking, in terms of Western domination in our cultural sphere and society.
Mm-hmm.
Were the most popular group in Soviet Union, or one of the most popular groups in Soviet Union in 60s, and we could do nothing with that. I mean, the Soviet leadership could do nothing
Yeah.
with that because they didn't have the communist Beatles.
Yeah.
So,
And they had
and
no. They also really had no desire to create them or comprehension of
absolutely,
why they were popular either, which is important.
the Soviet leadership didn't understand the importance of cultural warfare.
Mm-hmm.
So West won the Cold War with jeans, bubblegum, and Hollywood action movies.
Yeah.
That's what happened, because it's funny to say, but my father told me that if someone in Soviet Union in the times where he was young had the opportunity to get a pack of Marlboro cigarettes, once he finished this pack, he filled it with Soviet Yava cigarettes and kept using it to
Oh, I see.
show off this. I mean, it's just a paper, it's a carton box of cigarettes. And of course, now in Russia, no one will do this.
Well,
But
no.
back in these times, having a Marlboro box of cigarettes was already some kind of a sign of, being part of an elite.
Yeah. Well, I would say
Protocol.
today.
It's
Uh,
protocol.
yeah, today the cost of being in the elite is way more expensive. That's like, especially now that there's sort of the sanctions, it would have to be like a brand new iPhone, and only the new one. Even the previous one doesn't count anymore. It has to be the newest one for whatever it costs, $1,500, $2,000, whatever it is. You know,
Yeah.
so it's
So
amazing. So people in the Soviet Union were really that poor.
they were not poor in terms of economies, probably because, well, we had food, we had our own cars, but we didn't have this marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what's happening now is that in the world, if you buy a premium car, you pay a lot of money for emotions and for marketing and for feeling cool
Yeah.
driving this car, even though you can buy a 2 times cheaper car with almost the same functions and technology.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the Skoda Octavia and you have a BMW.
Yeah.
BMW is 2 times more expensive, but technically, it won't be 2 times better.
Mm-hmm.
The money, this amount of money you will pay for the right to say, I have a BMW.
Gotcha.
So that's terrible, and that's great in terms of marketing. And Western marketing, Western ability to create, a world of illusions, of consumerism, eventually won the Cold War. Now we have everything you may probably want. Russia now is Disneyland and a land of dream for a Soviet person.
Yeah.
So
But
on the
you know
one
what,
hand,
Andre, I'd like to stop you there, because it is, and yet I hear from so many of those people that sort of bear still this Soviet mentality. They're a little bit unhappy with things. They miss the Soviet education system, as I hear over and over again. Or they used to give out apartments for free. I was in a sort of I try not to get in arguments with people online, but sometimes I'm just curious to talk to someone I don't usually talk to. And it was sort of an older woman, and she went on this big rant about, like, you know what men need nowadays? They need to get the apartments for free, like back in the old days. When I was telling her, like, no, men need to go out and take from the world and try to earn money and maybe buy a house, or even better, build a house. Oh my God. No, we must have everything provided for us. And the more I think about it, long story short, the people in the West who say that communism kind of feminizes you, I think they're right.
Absolutely. I have my own formula of understanding
Yeah.
the difference between capitalism. I'm against classical liberal capitalism as well as communism.
Yeah.
So, uh, liberal capitalism and communism are two sides of one medal.
Hmm.
Liberal capitalism is materialism for strong people.
Okay.
Leave me alone, I'll get everything myself.
Yeah.
Communism and socialism is materialism for weak people.
Um.
I will obey, I will do everything. Please give me this, this, and this.
Gotcha.
But both of these worldviews are material. Because both in liberal capitalism and in communism, the core is material, saying that what really makes a man happy is possessing a thing, an object, an apartment, a car, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's humiliating both in liberal capitalism and in communism.
Well, now, then, what would you say then? What should, or what either is or should be then the Russian system or view on this?
I believe that economy should serve the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Liberalism and communism are both based on the notion that material was previous to spirit.
I see.
And I believe that spirit is the first thing.
Well, yeah.
And
Well, then I think you're right, because one of the differences about Russia is you don't really hear too many people online arguing for this particular economic system. It's more sort of like, we need to make the country strong. However we can do it, that's how we'll do it.
Yes. If we need state control in some spheres, let's have state control.
Yeah.
If we need free market instruments, let's have free market instruments.
Yeah.
Let's not make a religion out of state control in the economy and out of free market.
Yeah.
Free market is a thing to serve a man.
Yeah.
And state control is a thing to serve a man.
Yeah.
And what's happening is that in liberal capitalism, man starts serving the free market.
Mm-hmm.
In communism, man starts serving the state and the state controlling economy. Everything in this world except God should obey to the human being. God gave us this world so that we could be here, the rulers and the kings of this world. And that's idolatry. So liberal capitalism and communism are both idolatry.
Yeah.
Sinful, and I'm against it.
Well, I think you just, I have a sort of Eurasian ideas podcast that I sort of do in parallel with this, and that's a good topic for an episode. I'll steal your ideas there and claim them to be my own. But anyways, getting back to our sort of more darker topic, the history of the war there. Now, we get into this phase that the Ukrainians called the anti-terrorist operation, or from a Russian perspective, genocide or ethnic cleansing, whatever term you would prefer. So how did that, again, I'm putting a lot of my own biases into it, how did that anti-terrorist operation actually look over the 8 years that it was put into place?
In 2014, it was a fight of unprepared armies. Mm-hmm. My first trip to the war zone was in September 2014. Mm-hmm. I was between Novozovsk and Mariupol. Yeah. Mariupol at this time was under control of Ukraine. And I filmed a column, a group of tanks, of Ukrainian tanks that were burned by our guys, by Donetsk guys, Donetsk militia. And I wanted to stand on the burnt tank, to have a photo of me standing on the burnt tank. And people from Donetsk militia that were accompanying me told me, please don't do this. That's their grave.
Oh.
So it shows how actually, even in the war, you see how a man, a human being, carries on being a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, at this time I understood these guys in this tank, they were coming to kill the guys that were with me.
Yeah.
And I wanted to stand on this tank, and they said, don't stand on their graves. Don't stand on the graves of people who came here to kill me.
Yeah.
That's what they said. Well, that's my emotional, personal understanding and feeling of who is right in this conflict. Because I know how the Ukrainian side, what they do to the prisoners of war from our side, how they torture them, cut out genitals, and well, it's terrible. And I just understand that the truth is on our side because we keep fighting the biblical way. The Bible, the Holy Bible, has the precise instruction of how we should fight to have a victory from God. We need to obey certain rules.
Yeah.
And from the very beginning, the Donetsk militia were closer to this idea. I will not say that everyone there is saint and there are no war criminals, idiots, and whoever. Of course, there are a lot of them as well, like in any other army of the world. But they were definitely closer to this Christian, I would say, eternal ideal of a military person. And of course, back in 2014, we didn't have this amount of rage and hatred from both sides. Because after the main battles, after the several surrounding of Ukrainians, the conflict was frozen through Minsk agreement. And for 8 years, this was also called position war, where there were no moving up front, they were just shooting at each other or not, and the Ukrainians were shelling Donetsk all the time.
Yeah.
The Donetsk was shelled for 8 years. A lot of children died. This Alley of Angels.
Yeah.
The memorial in
for
Donetsk.
those who might not know, because our viewers remember we have a foreign audience, what's the word alley in Russian has a different connotation, and it's more like a small street, not necessarily a street behind a building. And so there's this Alley of Angels that represents, it's a memorial to all the numerous children who were killed during this process of artillery strikes.
Yes. And after the beginning, the special military operation in February was a different stage of war, because the regular army of Russia met very different army of Ukraine. Ukrainian army between 2014 and 2022 are two different armies, definitely. Ukrainian army in 2014 was corrupted, was sold out almost totally, and had a low morale. And for 8 years, while we were preparing our army, the West was preparing Ukrainians.
Yeah.
And of course, there are thousands of military instructors from US, Europe, Israel, who said that after the beginning of the new conflict in Israel, 4,000 military instructors got back to Israel. 4,000 people, only from Israel, who were instructing and preparing Ukrainian forces.
Oh yeah, that's right. And that's the four, and also that's the 4,000 that chose to go down, and the 4,000 that survived. Which means, because I actually think, Andre, I think the number of foreign, we'll say in quotes, mercenaries, I think is vastly more than anyone reports. Judging by what you
Definitely.
see on like social media and statistics like that, yeah.
Absolutely. So, and I mean, in 8 years, it's quite a time.
Hmm.
Uh, it took Hitler 8 years to start war against Soviet Union.
Oh yeah,
He came into power in 1933,
yeah,
and in 1941, the Great Patriotic War started. It's
yeah,
not like attacking Poland; it's attacking, Soviet Union.
yeah. It was a different level.
8 years is a lot, and the Ukrainian military leadership and the Western military leadership used time, I would say properly, to prepare a brand new army. A brand new army with the support of all the intelligence infrastructure of NATO, as well as all the latest guns and tanks and artillery they have.
Hmm.
So we're now fighting not with a Eastern European country of late Soviet Union like the Yugoslavian army was in the 90s.
Hmm.
We're fighting actually a NATO level army with probably the best in the world military human material, because East Slavic people, Russians, Belarusians, Ukrainians, are still the best soldiers.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the scale of conflict in special military operation and compare it to anything else in recent 70 years.
Well, it's to be honest, in some ways bigger than all of the American operations since the end of the Cold War. You just sort of combine them into one; they still pale in comparison.
Absolutely. This war costed more than 500,000 of people only to Ukraine.
Well, yeah.
500,000 of men, of military servicemen. Can you imagine
Well, that
something
was the didn't in World War II it was about 500,000 Americans died. So that was like the entirety of World War II for America.
less Americans?
Oh,
Like
less. Oh,
280. I need to check. I
I
need
thought
to
it was
check.
something in the high 400,000s.
I'm gonna check. One
But it's
second.
already the well. Long story short, the Ukrainians have already still lost then more by all estimates I've heard than America did during World War II, which was for the United States was very significant.
292,000.
Oh, so then they're way ahead. I see.
So it's Ukraine has already lost almost 2 times more than US in World War II.
Yeah.
That's the scale of the conflict. The thing is that I don't believe that current Western societies have this number of men who are capable of staying in trenches for a year and a half, killing and being killed.
No. And especially like I tell people and they don't believe me, but it's true. When I was in 12th grade, remember in America we go to 12 grades. Of the people who went in the military, it was 19 girls. Because it's all about like the bonuses and the free college. And the thing is, really, if our military was actually put into like a fight, way too many people who are there only for college and a bunch of foreigners who only want citizenship. The amount of like real Marines, like that sort of mentality where they actually want to fight and they're into it and that's their sort of like, they're the war fighter type of guy. I think there's only maybe 50 or 100,000 of those type of guys in America. And then that's it. That's all you got. Because when you talk to Europeans especially, they do not care. Everything in Europe about the military is just going through the motions. Like I've met people who've served in Austria and Italy and Germany, and their military is a complete would it be simulacrum is one of our favorite words. It's just like this fake thing that's supposed to try to pretend to be some sort of military in a
Yes.
fake NATO organization, but no one really wants to. Well, no one. A tiny minority is the warfighter guy. The overwhelming majority are just like, I have to do this, leave me alone. That's not the kind of
Well,
army that's going to fight to the death.
and look what's happening to us now. We started with about 300,000 military contingent in February 2022.
Yeah.
Then we had 300,000 mobilized in September.
Yeah.
And in 2023, more than 350,000 people voluntarily signed a contract.
Yeah.
That's a million of people who don't spend their time cleaning their rooms
Oh yeah.
and jogging around their barracks with phonic sounds.
Well, yeah.
This is
Essentially.
1 million of people who are actually fighting in the new type of warfare.
Yeah.
And getting the experience no other army in the world has now.
Yeah.
That's it. So the special military operation is definitely something that has already changed Russian army dramatically. Because of course we had mistakes, we had problems, a lot of them were solved. And the thing is, some people, especially from the West, ask me, if you Russians fight so well, why don't you move forward in this conflict?
Yeah.
And the answer is that we are fighting with Russians.
Yeah.
The people on the other side are just like us, but with the help of the West, with NATO intelligence systems and with NATO supplying of weapons. So that's why this conflict is so intensive.
No.
Because on two sides of this conflict, we have Russians.
Yeah.
I remember back in 2008 when I was a student at MGIMO. MGIMO is, well, I won't be shy, I'll tell the truth, is Russian Harvard.
Yeah.
It is the best university that prepares humanitarian political elite in our country. And it's the university of our Foreign Affairs Ministry.
Well, yeah, having a degree from MGIMO essentially means you're greenlit to have some sort of position within the government, especially something like at an embassy or something of that nature.
And back in 2008, at my third or fourth year at Faculty of International Journalism, I had a course of geopolitics.
Mm-hmm.
And this course of geopolitics was lectured by General Colonel of Chief Генштаб, как будет?
Oh, that's
General.
Oh my God, like the Joint
General
Chiefs
Headquarters
of Staff or something, or general, yeah. Well, for America,
yes.
it'd be the Joint Chiefs of Staff, I think.
Yes. So that's the rank of a person that lectured us.
I see.
And he said, so this general took part in the negotiations of non-proliferation of nuclear weapons with the US.
Yeah.
General Lashov. And he told us at this time, in 2008, that the Western think tanks understand that sooner or later the Ukraine will be part of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So their objective is to do so that Russia gets this territory totally devastated,
yeah.
with ruined infrastructure, a lot of ecological problems,
yeah.
and murdered or demotivated or aggressive population.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we are getting.
Well, yeah.
That's what we are getting.
A lot of the area that's been beyond the front line from the moment when the anti-terrorist operation became the actual special military operation, everything that is sort of in that war zone. I mean, what's left, man? Like, it's because even someone was asking me on one of the podcasts, like, well, what's it's going to be like after this is over, like with the whole situation with like real estate, like, are they going to cut this up and give it to the soldiers as some sort of like bonus or something? And it's kind of like, it's too early to even think about that, man. Like the amount of mines, the mines are everywhere. And, so it could really result in being like a gigantic gray dead zone for a really long time. Obviously, mines don't function forever sitting in the wet ground. and eventually you can start to grab them, but it's literally dangerous. If the war were to stop tomorrow, what I'm trying to say, to not bore you here, if the war stopped tomorrow, the war zone itself is so dangerous from mines and unexploded munitions and other traps that no one could live there. Not for a long time. So essentially,
for a decade at least.
but the thing is, again with the West, and then another philosophical then question. So the West, why do then they see the necessity that, okay, we're going to lose this territory to the Russians? First off, why do they consider Ukraine their territory? And then secondly, what does it matter? Like, why do they have to try to squeak out some sort of victory out of the situation? Why is that a victory?
Well, first of all, West understands that Russia will not be part of it, and they didn't want it. We had this possibility probably in beginning of 2000,
Yeah.
when Putin himself negotiated the joint military bloc from Lisbon to Vladivostok.
Yeah, yeah.
How good would this be? There were some kind of negotiations that the Western Europe and Russia would form some kind of a joint security infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it never happened because that would cut US from us, from the Eurasia, from Europe. And the thing is that actually after we understood this, the West understood that it needs to destroy Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And to destroy someone, someone big like Russia, you need to try to cut us into pieces and to burn us around. Yeah. There is a conception of rings of anaconda
mm-hmm.
that would suffocate us. Not suffocate, but strangle.
It's both strangle and suffocate. Both words would work in this context.
Good.
So
good. So, and the West started surrounding Russia with Russophobic regimes, starting with the Baltic states, then Ukraine, then Georgia. That's what we're happening.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of a rope that they are putting around our neck and trying to
and
strangle.
In some ways, when they brought the Baltic states into the into NATO, in some ways we could again say that's kind of was a mistake, because then once they're part of NATO, they can't be used as this like human meat shield against the Russians like Ukraine has been.
Absolutely. So it's a buffer zone.
Yeah.
And you always have it. It's the geopolitical concept of frontier.
Yeah.
That there are always a frontier between big geopolitical actors like the West and Russia.
Yeah.
That always will be a war zone.
Mm-hmm.
So Ukraine, if you look at history, has always been a war zone.
Yeah. Well, Poland too, because they're in the same
Poland
situation.
and Ukraine, the biggest military operations, the biggest battles in history of Eastern and Western Christian civilization fighting each other took place in the lands that used to be called Ukraine and Poland.
Well, yeah.
And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the West started celebrating its total victory.
Mm-hmm.
Then Putin came, they understood that they do not control the whole situation, but at least they were controlling all the ex-parts of Soviet Union, except Russia and Belarus.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely they were considering Ukraine their territory, because after Maidan, you cannot be an officer ranking higher than major in Ukrainian special forces, special services, if you are not a CIA agent.
So
gotcha. Any colonel in Ukrainian special services and higher is a CIA agent.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot become a colonel in special services in Ukraine without signing documents with CIA.
Gotcha.
That's how they considered Ukraine their own territory.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they were planning and preparing its territory as a platform to start the military operation against Russia. So Crimea would not be part of Russia if Maidan didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Maidan and this balancing of Ukraine, and before Maidan they always were trying to so-called, so to say, have a balance between east and the west of the country.
Yeah.
And the Maidan was supposed to disbalance it.
Well, yeah,
And
completely stack everything towards the west.
Absolutely. So once it happened, we understood that these people who came into power as a result of Maidan, the first thing they would do is take our Black Sea fleet away from Crimea.
Yeah.
And bringing American fleet to Crimea.
Yeah.
Meaning that, well, our main cities in southern part of European Russia would be, in the crossfire.
Well, like I mentioned to people before, Russia has, I think, you might prove me wrong on this because you're more knowledgeable, 4 navies. There's a Baltic Navy, a Black Sea Navy, there's a Pacific Navy, and a northern, Arctic Navy. And essentially cutting out any one of those cuts out Russia's geopolitical power in such a way that it could never recover. So I tell people that, you might be worried about a nuclear weapon right now, but when Russia did the referendum and took the Crimea, I think that very much so, they didn't care about the consequences, because without the Crimea, Russia wouldn't exist anymore. As Putin made it clear,
absolutely.
the world won't continue without us. But anyways, Andrei, I bet you're probably running out of time here. We only agreed for a short interview today, and it went way longer than short. So anyways, man, great talking to you, and we'll have you back on because our history is finally starting to approach sort of the present here. So next time you'll come back for part 3, and we'll talk about your present experiences on the front lines. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will.